はい、皆さんこんにちは。こんばんは、ライズです。今回こちらね、ダゴンというね、ゲームをね、やっていきたいと思います。こちら、無料の方でね、やってるんで、追加コンテンツはないんですけれども、なんでしょう、クトゥルフ神話とかに関係するゲームっていうことらしいんですけどね。ちょっとサウンドは、落としとこうか。50ぐらいかな？ OK。はい。よくわかんないんですけど、なんか有名なセリフとかもあるらしいんで、早速やってみましょう。ここで難しい選択やアクションなんかはもちろん関する必要はありません。移動はストーリーに沿って進むことで制限されます。はー。なるほど。もう、あれだね、うちらが動かすわけじゃないんだね。
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
お、視界だけ動かせる。インタラクティブな要素を用意する。物語が進展する要素や原作の短編小説、その他歴史背景。ほうほう。トビアなんかくするの、作るためには集中して、こういうなんか目印を探すってことか。はい。なんかあるかな。これ以上向けねえんだ。まあ、今回お試しでまずこれ。
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
なんか主人公はモルヒネ中毒かなんたらかんたらって書いてあったね。
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate.
はあ。なんか引きずった跡があるね。
When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
はい、じゃあなんかペンで書くんです。あ、こういうことか。はい。あ、モルヒネのあれなんだね。へえ。あ、当時のこういう感じで制限なし販売すると、やべえ時代やな。あ、こんな感じで探すんだ。喋ってる時は別に振り向かなくていいんで。OK。はい、書き
It
ま
was
し
in
た
one of
と。
the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
軍用か。主人公はアメリカ人ってことかな？はい、周りをちょっと見てみましょう。何かあるかもしれません。何もないです。上も何もないね。じゃあ行こうか。はい。お、砲撃だ。
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation,
ほうほう。
so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
海軍の捕虜として公平に配慮を持って扱われた。捕まったんだね。あ、ドイツ軍のあれだね。フ族。まあ、適当に読んでください。読みたい人は止めて読んでください。星が綺麗。夕日かな？とりあえず今度こっちだね。ボート。
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
普通に逃げれたんだね。このボートで。これが食料とあれってことね。主人公は身投げしたっていう話をしたから、多分その前の話ってことだよね。モルヒネに溺れる前かな。
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator.
すごいな。航海士として太陽と星の位置から赤道の南側にいるっていうことがわかるんだ。わかんねえよ、こんなもん見たって。
Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
なるほど。昔は航海士ってね、あれだよね、ワンピースのナイも航海士だよね。こう、星とかの位置を調べて、方角とかそういうのを決めるんだよ。わかるんだよね。はい。で ああ、太陽。他なんかインタラクティブできそうなものはない。眩しいな、太陽。見ましょう、太陽。
The weather kept fair,
日が昇りま
and
し
for
たね。
uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
ほうほう。まあ、天気いいっていうのはありがたいことだよね。あ、水とか食料を通るってことか。お。なんか、左ずーっと向いてると、ブンって戻されたんだけど。あ、どういうこと？上側から行くと左側行くとなんか、ブンって戻される。どういうことだよ。いや、これ水かなこれは。
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
横になって寝てるわ。
The change happened whilst I slept.
お？
Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
ずっと眠ってはいた。おー。なんだここ。大王位か。なんか変なやついる。始まりましたね。うわ、なんだこれ。
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
さあ目覚めていきなりこんな風景だったら、どういうことじゃなくて、いや、怖ってなるわな。
For there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core.
気持ち悪いな、これ。
The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain.
わ、タコみたいなのいる。
Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
これって、こいつ、あれか？反対向いてんのかな？背中向いてんのかなこれ。お腹側かな？
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
はい。ちょっと周りを見てみる。なんかやべえやついっぱいいるな、俺。あ、これはなんか見れるんだ。ダゴンの起源。ダゴンの起源がある。はあはあはあ。魚への嫌悪感が来てる。はあ。この辺は何もないね。じゃあ船行きましょうか。そのヌメヌメの横通るの大丈夫？
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
確かにこの状況を現実的に考えるとそれぐらいしかないわな。
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
なんかあれもヌメヌメしてる。キモ。あれ何？お、上にいる。上にいる。
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
はあ。この荷物を持っていくってことだね。いや、それが後ろのこのタコみたいな気にならないのか、お前は。うわぁ、なんか、いっぱいいるね。こんなとこ歩きたくねえな。荷物持っていきましょう。
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
はい。ということで、まっすぐ進んでいくということですね。なんかヌメヌメしてるな、それでも。この横のこれ何？なんかヤリイカみたいなのいる。クソだけヤリイカみたいなのいるな。まあ、まだ恐怖の全貌ではないんでね。どんどん進みましょう。
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
何これ？いや、主人公もうちょっと周り気にした方がいいと思うよ。明らかになんかおかしいよ、これ。やばいじゃん。行くか。行くんだねっていうか。クジラ？クジラだ。特に何も、あの小高い丘を目指していくんだね。
That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
だいぶ遠いんやね、あの丘。なにこの、安手みたい。どちらかというとディバイアさんなんかね、これね。向こう行きましょう、じゃあ。野宿すんのか？
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance.
これ丘じゃなくても山よな。でっか。
An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface.
やば、でかすぎるだろ。
Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill.
はあ、
I know not why my dreams were so wild that night. But ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain,
変な
I
夢見
was
たってこと？
awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more.
バブみたいな。悪夢ってこと？
Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day.
どういうこと？
Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy.
ああ、そういうことか。日中明るい時に行くと暑いから水分とか飲んじゃうけど、夜になってしまえば気温が下がるからちょっと歩くのマシになるってことか。
Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset.
マジか、行くんかこれ。
Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
山やん。じゃあ荷物持っていきますか。Let's go.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon,
なんか穴あるって？
whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine.
は
I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night.
あ、高っ。どうなってんのこれ。山頂だよな。
Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
これ覗き込めってこと？やだな。行きますか。
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent.
絶対足滑るってこんなん。
Whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
あれこれさ、降りるの？登るの？降りるんだよね。
Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated.
なんだここ。
All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me.
モノリスみたいな。
An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
なに今度、あれ行くの？まだ降りていけってことか。ほんとなんか雰囲気ゲーやけどね。
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature.
まあ、そうでしょうね。あんな真四角な石があったらもう、誰か人為的に作られたとしか思えねえよ
A
な。
closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
なんだインタラクトできてるアイテムはないね、行こうか。
For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith,
モノリス。
whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
何の生き物のね、信仰対象なんでしょう。さあ、さらに先へ進めということなんで行きましょう。
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the cyclopean monolith,
なんかこのモノリス模様が出てきたけど
on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
なんじゃこりゃ。なんか、魚あって、海があって、その下に何かがいるみたいな。周りは何もない。行きましょう。
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world,
すごいな。なんかいろいろいるね。
but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain.
なるほど。
It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
あの真ん中のあれってことなんだこれ。なんだか石碑などを通して物語を語ると。まあなんかこれを集めるといいってことか。まあいいや、行きましょう。
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men.
何らかの人形を表してんだ。これか。
Though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto.
確かになんか 人間の形はしてるけど、なんかヒレみたいなのついてる
or
ね。
paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well.
波の形だけ綺麗だよな。
Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail,
その人間の顔や形を詳しく描写するのやめとこう。
for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint.
そんなに気持ち悪いってこと？
Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
ほうほう。
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall.
人間のようで人間ではないみたいな。
Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself.
なんか戦ってるね。
I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size.
え？これってさ、つまりクジラ並みにでかいってこと？
But in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe.
まあそうだな。よくあるよね。こう、太陽神がとか、エジプトのあれみたいな感じとか。
Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
神秘的な神様っていう風に思うことにしたってことね、主人公。
Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
突然それが見てる。なんか波打ってる。
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
やば。
Vast, Polyphemus-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith,
ほほほほほ。
about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds.
ほう。主人公気失
I
っちゃっ
think I
た。
went mad then.
やべえ、産地が産地溜まっちゃったか。
Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
ほうほう。なに急いで戻るみたいなこと？
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
狂っちゃったんだな。
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
さあ、とりあえずボートに帰ってきましたけど、倒れた？
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital,
サンフランシスコ見つけてくれたボロいな病院。
brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean.
ほうほう。
In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention.
まあそれはね、誰も信用してくんないわな。
Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
まあ夢だって言い聞かせたくなるわな。それここがサンフランシスコの病院なんだね。なんかある。ジャーナリスト。はい。皆さん、読めなかったら止めて読んでください。読むと長いんで、行きましょう。私も後で止めて読もうと思います。
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist
ほう。
and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
その辺の事情に詳しい考古学者に出会ったんだね。ダゴン。 あ、そこここ以外は特に触るとかなんか、じゃあそこ。はい。それはなんだ
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
どういうこと？救いようがないほど伝統的であることに気づきって。あ、クトゥルフ神話。ラブクラフトはこの去った後にダーレス作ったもの。はあ。はあ。はええああ、今度そっちはいはい、行きますよと。時計か。何見とんねんえ何何こここなんかあんのこの変なおっさりの彫刻に見られるだけなんもないもんね。あったらハテナマークつくもんね。てかあれだね、ブンブン振り回してるから画面用意しそうだよ。
It is at night,
ごめんよ。
especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing.
あいつが見える。
I tried morphine,
モールキネを試してみた。
but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave.
あらまあ。
So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
あ、なんかある。ラブクラフトとタバコと酒。このラブクラフトさんがこういう手紙とかを書いて、それを後々別の人が、クトゥルフ神話として描いたってことでいいのかな？
Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm,
まあそう思うわな。
a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply.
ほう。
I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite.
今なんか走ってた、泳いでたんじゃない？
I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind.
うん。
Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
ああ、こういうことになるんじゃないかっていう妄想を空想しちゃうわけな。まあ、そんな奇妙な生物見ちゃったらね、まあそうなるわな。ニューヨーク。
The end is near.
あ、酒に酔ってるみたいな感じやね。
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
おお、なんかドア開けようとしてる。怖っ。怖いけどなんかある？なんもねえな。
It shall not find me.
見つかるものか。開いたよ。
God, that hand!
やばい。お、
The window! The window!
窓に。走れーで、ダーンと落ちて死んでしまうか。はー。これで、あれなんだね、物語終わるんだね、ここで。 いや、これね、クトゥルフ神話が好きで、このラブクラフトさんの、この小説とか、まあ、原作がわかる人だったらね、多分ね、興奮すると思う。あんまクトゥルフ神話ってそういうね、なんて言うんだろう。関わったことはないんだけども、これなかなか引き込まれるね。なんか、ちょっと知りたくなる、クトゥルフ神話を。で、集めたトリビアがここにあるんだね。なんか、あんまり集まってない。嘘だろ。こんなにあったトリビアこんなに。なかったやろ。まあ、とりあえず、ダゴンでした。なんだろうね。クトゥルフ神話って、神話だけが、すごいなんか一人歩きしてるようなイメージだったんだけども、元があるってなると、いや、なんだろうね、人間の気持ち悪っていうね、感じるのが、ああいう感じなんだろうなっていうね、ちょっと思いましたね。ちょっとこれを機に、私もクトゥルフ神話にちょっといろいろと使ってみようかなって思います。じゃあ、今回はこの辺で終わりたいと思います。ご視聴ありがとうございました。バイバーイ。